Welcome to the Wise Fiduciary Podcast. I am Marta Hurst, one of your hosts from Fiduciary Wise. Whether you're a thought leader, service provider, CEO, or decision maker, this podcast is for you. We break down best practices, the services and solutions available to you, discuss the latest topics, and shake up the industry norms. Join us as we explore, challenge, and navigate the future of fiduciary responsibility together. So, this season, we're really shaking it up, doing something different, something bolder, something necessary, because let's face it, the 401k world isn't just about safe harbor notices, 5500s, and fund lighten-ups anymore. It's about lawsuits, legislation, ethics, conflicts, and this season, we're putting those controversies under the spotlight. We're not here to push an agenda or to tell you which side to be on. We really want to explore both sides of the argument. This is the fiduciary frontline. This is the great 401k debate. Isaac, what are we talking about today?
Thanks, Marta. So I'm Isaac Wood. I'm an ERISA 402A specialist here at Fiduciary Wise. Marta, today's topic is forfeitures. I don't know if you know it or not, Marta, but in just under 2 years, plaintiffs have filed more than 30 class action lawsuits alleging that the use of 401k forfeitures to offset future employer contributions violates ERISA. That's 30 lawsuits in just the past 2 years, only about forfeitures and how they're being used by employers with the alleging that violates ERISA. So before we get into the arguing or the spotlighting or this bold encounter that we're about to have, let's start with the basics, right? What are forfeitures, right? Good question. When employers make matching or profit sharing contributions into a 401k plan, those amounts are often subject to a vesting schedule. If an employee leaves the company before becoming fully vested, the unvested portion of those employer dollars of the employer contributions is forfeited. See what they did there with the name?
You see what I did there?
Those dollars are forfeited, and so those become forfeitures, meaning that it goes back to the plan instead of staying with the employee, right? So based on the legal plan document, the plan administrator could potentially have the options to pay plan expenses with those forfeiture dollars. They could reduce future contributions with those forfeiture dollars or reallocate to participants those forfeiture dollars. Forfeitures should be used no later than 12 months after the end of the plan year in which they were incurred. So essentially, if they're forfeited in the year 2024, 12 months after the end of that year, you'd want to use them by the end of 2025. That all makes sense. So we're going to look at a couple of different arguments on how should forfeitures be used. What does the law say? What can't we do with this? What shouldn't we do with these? And let's just see if we are still friends after this. Fight! So argument number one. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
Using those forfeiture dollars to reduce employer expenses is a prohibited transaction. ERISA 406 includes conflicts of interest or self-dealing. So does an employer choosing to use forfeitures to reduce contributions create a conflict of interest? What say you, Marta Hurst?
Yes.
Oh,
the end. I'm just kidding. So the argument here is that fiduciary duty of loyalty is breached. And we preach all the time that the employer, the plan fiduciary, is to act in the sole interest of the participant. So if I am an employer saving on the contributions that I'm going to make to the plan versus using it to pay an expense that otherwise I'm passing on to the employees, then I see the argument that is self-dealing. It benefits me as the employer. It doesn't, it's not acting in the best interest of my employees. Although I also have to say, you mentioned one of the uses of forfeiture is reallocation to participants. And if we are talking best interest of participants, that is the only option. And that's not what happens, like hardly ever.
Does that ever happen?
So,
like so in all transparency, I read that because it was on the script in front of me. Does that happen? Do forfeitures just get given to remaining participants?
I see it happen most often when a plan is terminating and because they have a forfeiture balance and they need to get rid of it. So they use it to pay whatever remaining expenses that they have. And unless they have a mandatory employer contribution that they're going to have to make through the date of termination, they just reallocate that back to the participants. That's really the only time I see it used. I don't see it like year after year, like, oh, just reallocate that to my employees. I mean, they should. That's nice, but that would be very nice. What happens.
Yeah. So I can see that argument for sure. And when you're looking at the letter of the law, and you made some very true statements there, right? The plan sponsor is always and almost exclusively to deal in the participant's best interest and the best interest of the participants and their beneficiaries. The argument, though, the answer of no, that it's not a breach of duty, is simply that the document allows it, assuming that the document allows it. Right. Assuming that the plan document allows.
And it usually does. They're usually all checked off, usually all three options, because you want to remain flexible and able to do whatever you want when you want.
Creativity in the plan document space. There can be, and you could argue should be, but that's a separate podcast. And so the part that blew my mind about reading out that these dollars would be reallocated to the participants is the best interest of the participants doesn't mean that just every dollar out in the universe goes to the participants. Like, that's just not, like, those dollars were never theirs. These are employer dollars that were put in as employer matches for participants who then did not qualify for those dollars, right? So those were the employer's expenses. That if I had $10,000 in Marta Hurst's 401k account from XYZ company that we work for, and you leave the company, what does Isaac Wood have any right to that $10,000 in Marta Hurst's? If it doesn't go to Marta because she didn't qualify, why should it at any point make its way to Isaac Wood's pocket? That's above and beyond the best interest of the participant. And the plan document allows the employer to take those dollars that came out of their bank account and keep them in the plan, reallocate them to the plan. Yes. It's not they take them out and go invest them somewhere else in the company, but to reallocate
that would definitely be a prohibited transaction.
Those dollars were initially earmarked as match dollars or as profit sharing dollars to pull them out and then just reuse them as what they were originally earmarked for. Like, stop throwing a fit, participants. Like, we're working in your best interest, but that doesn't mean that you just get your grubby little hands on everything that ever happened. Come on now.
How shall I do it?
Okay, but
what did I say?
The employer, you didn't say anything wrong. So those monies were contributed as employer contributions, but once they made it into the plan, those aren't the employer's dollars anymore. Those are plan dollars, and so it's not. I see your point. I do, but the employer is it? They still have a duty of loyalty, and shouldn't they be putting their participants first?
But let me ask you this. Okay. If they reallocated those dollars, right? This $10,000 that comes out of Marta's account, they reallocate them as match dollars or as a profit sharing contribution, right?
Okay. You're not talking about reducing future contributions. You're talking about reallocating.
Are those dollars going into? The participants.
Wait, are you
they're going to the participants anyway. We're not even arguing about dollars not making the way to the participants. It's that they go to the participants in a way that lowers the contributions for the plan sponsor that next year, or they go into the participants in a way that pays down the participant fees. Either way, they're going into the participant's account.
I'm going to tell you this. I think the specifics matter. in this situation. For example, if you have an employer who has a safe harbor match contribution and they have to make, and it's $50,000 and they have to make that $50,000 contribution no matter what, or if they have some kind of fixed match or a fixed formula and that money is going in the account anyway, and they're now using that to reduce their contribution and putting expenses towards the employee accounts. I get that more than a lot of larger employers who have some kind of discretionary match. They might have, here's what we usually do, but a lot of it is written in as discretionary. And so who's to say that if, so maybe I'm making a $50,000 contribution to the plan, but if I didn't have those forfeitures, I would make less because I don't have to make a certain amount of matching contribution. So maybe it's helping the employer budget to be able to distribute more dollars to the participants versus, this is all we have budgeted this year, so that's all we're going to do.
Yeah. So you've brought up a very key element to this, and we're treating it like it's a black and white yes or no, and just fisticuffing over it. But at the end of the day, it's really very dependent on what is this exact scenario. Specifically, what's the plan document say that you can do? What is the specific match that is being applied to, and kind of what is the reality that is going on inside of that plan? It just seems like in a litigious world that we live in now, this is like the dollars ended up in the participant's account, and they're just whining and complaining about how it got there.
Yeah, maybe.
that would be the take on the no.
Cannot roll my eyes any louder.
So let's talk about, I also think, so the IRS, Congress, and the DOL have long supported fiduciary discretion in handling forfeitures. So is that where the problem lies? Who is actually making the decision about how to use those dollars? One, having formerly worked for a TPA and seeing how plans operate in general, is that being a fiduciary discussion, or is that Sally Mae, who submits the contributions, using it to reduce employer contributions through payroll? Like, what is the process to actually
making the decision?
Who's making the decision? And was there thought behind it?
Well, and is it is it that difficult to sort of put together a policies and procedures document on the front end of a plan that says, hey, if we are in a place where we have forfeitures, this is how we're going to use them? And I would think that
we should definitely do that.
I would think that would, the more specific you can be in that document, that would sort of alleviate a lot of lawsuits show up, and this is kind of across the board, not just specifically in ERISA. Like lawsuits show up when expectations were not met. When we're expecting one thing and something else was delivered, and then now we're going to sue you, right? And so if the expectations can be clear of like, hey, when we get forfeitures, this is what we're going to do with them, whether you decide then you go yes or no on whichever way, but it's clearly communicated, this is what's going to happen, then does that provide a safe harbor in this space, or are you still open to litigation?
Oh, I think safe harbor is a very strong word to use for anything related to
forfeiture. It was the quotations for those just listening. Okay. There were air quotes used there.
Bold of you.
Okay, so I, for one, think that there is a lot of logic in putting together some kind of here's how we are going to handle forfeitures. I also think there are some logistics to consider. So sometimes you have plans that are set up for the fees to come out. They're built into the plan, right? The advisor, the TPA, maybe even certainly the record keeper. Sometimes even the fiduciary wise fee comes out. Like it's built in. It's basis points, right? And they are calculating that and sending that out. So if we have forfeiture dollars to use, is it practical from an operations standpoint for us to go to the record keeper and say, you know what? Okay, so don't deduct it this time. we're going to use the forfeiture to pay it. But then next quarter, you're going to need to reinstate our fee because otherwise there's not enough to do that. That's not practical. And you and I both know that these record keepers aren't just like, okay, cool, we just won't hold it this quarter. Everybody has to sign paperwork, and then you have to redistribute participant notices, and then you have to re-implement it again. It's not, it should be easier than it is, but it's not.
And then that all has to be done correctly. Like that has to, they're making changes.
And then you're potentially
changes that can be done incorrectly.
Right. And then you're paying for notices to go out. And so are you that's not practical. So if these fees were just set up to be deducted and it was just part of the operation, then that's one thing. I think the biggest, we talk to clients all the time about using forfeiture to pay their audit cost. It's a pretty big ticket item. The invoice comes in all at once. You send the record keeper a note, say, hey, pay our auditor. That's a very practical way to use those. But some of the other fees in a plan, it's just it's not operationally feasible to pick and choose when you're going to use forfeitures and when you're not.
Does that decision change if the audit cost was not set up to come out of participant accounts? Because then isn't that the same problem that these participants have, that they didn't get their hands on that money?
Say that again.
If you're using forfeitures to pay your audit cost.
No, so the argument is...
Does that decision change if the audit cost was not going to be paid by participants?
How can you argue that it wasn't? So the thing with the audit is it's, I don't know. And I've never seen any plan where it's just set up to be deducted from participant accounts.
Right.
Usually you get the bill and then the employer says, ugh, I don't think I'm going to pay this year. I think I'm going to have the employees pay it, which is allowed. That's allowed. So they can determine what gets paid.
Usually the audit is picked up exclusively by the employer. And so if you're going to, right or no?
Is it? Sometimes it's not. We got a variety of people, how they handle it.
Is it more often than not the audit is billed directly to the plan sponsor, or is it more often than not that the audit is applied to participant accounts?
Almost exclusively billed directly to the employer, but the employer can turn around and request that it be paid from plan assets, either forfeiture or from participant accounts if they don't have a forfeiture. And I've seen both. I don't know that I am involved enough in the payment of the audit fee to tell you it's 50-50 or it's 70-30, but it's certainly allowed.
Yeah. I was setting to our earlier discussion. To me, logically, and I understand that logic doesn't always apply in every space, but logically, there's not much difference between if I was an employer and I was getting a $15,000 audit bill that I was cutting a check for every year, right? For me to use forfeitures to pay for that, what's the difference in doing that than for me using forfeitures to just make my contributions into the 401k plan? The end result is that I get the benefit of the forfeitures and the participants don't. So to me, that's the same problem that participants would have with it.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
Sorry.
Problem.
My brain starts spinning because this goes back to I think it depends on situationally on the plan. But again, if you're talking about here's how we always handle these things, and the employer, I think there is a very good argument that the participant is neutral in how these are allocated. Or how the forfeiture is used. Obviously, in some of these court cases, it's not. But again, I don't always think that it's practical to pay plan expenses before reducing an employer contribution. This also comes down to a timing thing of we're supposed to use this X dollar amount by the end of this year, and I already paid this audit invoice, and I still have some dollars left, and how do I, at some point you also have to just use them. And so am I going to be well, I don't want to use it to reduce employer contributions because I'm worried I'm going to get sued. Well, you're supposed to use them. So, and I'm out of invoices to pay. I just need to figure this out. It's messy.
So the very clear element is that forfeitures have to be used inside the plan. It is very frowned upon for them to be taken by the employer and used for anything else. So they just in by the nature of them being used to address expenses in the plan, they're going to be being used to the benefit of the participants and their beneficiaries. And so really the question is, are they maximizing the benefit to participants, or are they just providing benefit to the participants? And does ERISA require you to at all times maximize the benefit at any point in time to the participants and their beneficiaries?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. And I do have to tell you that our recording of this is very timely. The DOL came out with some feedback, so a statement about this. So let me see if I can find, and we've got some links to some resources that we will put in the notes. I don't know how these podcasting show notes. There we go. Thank you. So under ERISA, the duty of loyalty provides that a fiduciary shall discharge his duties with respect to a plan solely in the interest of the participants' beneficiaries. We know that. And the fiduciary shall act for the exclusive purpose of providing benefits to the participants and their beneficiaries and defraying reasonable expenses of administering the plan. So if, however, those forfeitures get used, that doesn't impact either of those two things, is there really a breach of duty?
So let me ask. Yeah. So my question was, how could you use forfeitures inside of the plan, right? Mm-hmm. In a way that is not in any way providing benefit to the participants or defraying expenses?
I would argue that the terms of the document already, let me back up a little bit. I think as long as at the end of the day, the fees are reasonable. So let's say I've got a $62,000 audit and it's just your regular old plain vanilla plan. I might argue that those fees are unreasonable. And if those are deducted from the plan, then that's an issue whether they're paid from forfeiture or from the participant balances. But as long as the fees for the plan are reasonable and we are continuing, employers are continuing to provide a benefit to the participants and their beneficiaries, then unless something is just really wonky, I think the terms that are allowed in the document and the ways that the forfeiture are allowed to use are pretty reasonable.
Being able to use the forfeiture in whatever way within the parameters of the plan document and clearly within the plan, whether it's to as contributions, as matching contributions, as profit sharing contributions, or just to directly pay for fees, whether it be audit or whether it be record keeping, TPA, any other asset-based fee from a participant account. If you're doing any of those things, it feels like you're in fair game, and you're using them for the benefit of the participants in the plan.
I certainly can see situations potentially. I see that side of it too. I see that if I'm a participant and I'm paying all these expenses for the plan, and now you don't even have to make your full contribution because you're using those dollars to offset yours, but to your earlier
those
point,
dollars
my dollars anyway.
Those dollars wouldn't have been there if Marta would have just stayed working at the company for another 2 years, and they would have been in her account.
Or they wouldn't be there if the employer didn't make employer contributions to begin with, which plenty of plans
That part too. But it's like Isaac is the other participant in the plan. The fact that Marta left her position a year early and left some dollars on the table,
doesn't mean they're yours.
Who am I to say they have to come into my account? How they get applied? They're coming to my account in one way or the other. They're going into the plan, and so whether they're coming into my plan as a matching contribution or as a profit sharing contribution, or whether they're being used to lower the asset-based fee on my account, they're going to be used to my benefit. And it feels like any lawsuits in that space are just arguing that personally, I think my benefit would have been better used a different way, as opposed to the way that you used, which was to my benefit, just not to the degree that I feel like I could have benefited from this.
You know what I think?
What?
I think record keepers should figure out a way for employers to, if they wanted to, offset some of those employee expenses using forfeiture and not having to rework the entire contract process in order to do that. Just like they do with the forfeiture account to be used for employer contributions. There's just a little box they check when they're submitting their contributions. It says, I want to use $10,000 to reduce this. I mean, I think there's some opportunity to allow for more options, but we don't have those right now. And I don't, maybe this is some encouragement for record keepers to consider options.
Having options that allow for more benefit to the participants. But yeah, it feels like at the crux of this issue is, are you making decisions for the benefit of the participant, or are you required to maximize the benefit to the participants?
Yeah.
And it feels like if you can make a decision for benefit to the participants without maximizing the benefit. I mean, you see that when you design the plan. You're deciding your employer match. You're very rarely maximizing the match that could possibly. It would be a much better benefit to the participants if you did dollar for dollar up to 10%.
You're right. Yep.
So why as a participant, why can't I sue a plan for not doing that? That's not maximizing my benefit. It's much more to my benefit if you dollar for dollar up to 10%.
Don't we give people ideas about reasons to sue 401k plans?
Yeah.
I want a better employer contribution.
But isn't that the heart of the argument here, from one side of the table anyway?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are, I'm really interested to see some of these forfeiture cases have already been dismissed, but there's a whole lot of them. And so I'm really interested to see how it shakes out. And frankly, I think that even internally at Fiduciary Wise, there's some differing opinions on how this might shake out. So I will be very interested to see. In the meantime,
at the end of the day, whatever the courts say is how we then operate. Right. And so it'll be very interesting to see how they speak to this, and if they give some more guidelines that clearly define what it is that you can or can't use forfeitures for. And if they provide clear definition and clear direction, then for a fact we'll be right there following it.
I have heard that the new round of documents for the next document restatement will, there is some. Now, I don't remember where I heard this, so maybe we shouldn't quote me, but there is some proposed language that would stipulate they would be used first to pay plan expenses and then reduce employer contributions. But again, I think some of that stuff then comes down into timing and logistics of like if it's already being deducted. Yeah, I don't know. Yes. Anyway, so until we meet again. Thanks everybody for tuning in to the Wise Fiduciary podcast. We would love to hear your thoughts, answer your questions. So please drop us a comment, send us a message, or schedule a meeting with us at fiduciarywise.com/scheduling. And don't forget to join us next time for more insights and discussions and debates. And maybe I'll get some boxing gloves. I don't know. And we will see you in our next episode.